Hey, what's up you guys? Just gonna give a little introduction of my Dmg-101 SP mod. It's the SP inside an original Game Boy. Just showing here the tools that I use to go ahead and do this mod. We got some solder up there, some desoldering wick. We got our wire cutters, pliers, flathead, dry-wing screwdrivers, Phillips, X-Acto blade for fine cutting. I got my soldering iron, my rotary tool, my hot glue gun, and then also some air duster to make sure that we can get all the fine plastic off once we're done and finished here. So just in a moment here, I'll go ahead and dive into the start of this and let you know how to go ahead and actually make this Game Boy. Alrighty, so a couple of things I want to go over about before we start talking about the modification itself. The Game Boy Advance SP, the motherboard, it's very tiny compared to the original motherboard of the DMG, which actually came in two pieces. So we got the screen portion and the buttons, and then the back portion that actually processes the card reader. Alright. One thing I did notice while completing this modification is that this particular PCB, the leads, everything is very fragile. And what I mean by that is that you can tear up one of those copper leads from the card connector from anywhere very easily, thus ruining the whole motherboard. So you want to be super careful when you're desoldering everything, taking off the stuff you need to and rerouting into other locations, because it is very easy to go ahead and ruin the motherboard of the Game Boy Advance SP. For this example, I'm actually using one that I have messed up here. I tore a lead. Looks like right there. And it just did not work out too well for me. But as you see, we got it going, so no problems there. So let's go ahead, dive into this. Alrighty, so the first thing you're gonna want to do is you're gonna want to harvest the motherboard from the Game Boy Advance SP, as well as the screen. And once we got that harvested, we're gonna go over it here, because I generally like to start off right here at the battery connector. It's very simple. Once you desolder, it comes off, pops off. There's really only one anchor point right there, silver part right there, and then your positive and negative right there. So it's 3 points. You can see right there, there's 1 and 2, and then you have the anchor point on the back. So you're gonna want to go ahead, desolder the anchor point, and then you're gonna want to go ahead and desolder the leads right there to go ahead and pop this guy off. Very simple, and I'll show you what we're gonna do with him later. So let's go ahead, get into the trickier portions here. So next, you're gonna desolder the cartridge connector. Now remember, this is just an example board, but there's the 32 pins. You're gonna want to desolder them. You have 2 anchor points on the top right there holding it down. So you're gonna want to take those anchor points off too. Once you desolder the cartridge connector, and the reason you have to do this is because you want it to fit inside the DMG, which, don't mind the glue, but you want it to fit inside perfectly, so that it can read all the cartridges without a problem. So remember, examples here. So went ahead, desoldered that, take this off. Now to put it back on and to save space inside this case, which this is just an example, this is from an earlier project that I really wasn't liking, so I just scrapped it. You're gonna want to go ahead, I got some 26 gauge braided wire, so it's stranded braided wire, and you want just about this length, so about the same length as the SP screen there. That's all you need, and once again, that's to save room inside there so that not everything is pressing out when you're finished. And then what you're gonna do is, simply you're gonna solder it to that point, and then to the corresponding point on the cartridge connector. And that will give you mobility of the cartridge connector when you're moving it. So I've seen a lot on the forums and some videos out there of this mod being done, where they go ahead and they pull off this guy right here, and then they short out the leads so that it can go ahead and play Game Boy and Game Boy Color games, because apparently this switch right here is what flips it from 32 pin to 16 pin, so it allows the Game Boy cartridges to be read. So easiest way to do that too is to go ahead, there's only 4 points to desolder, so 1, 2, 3, 4, desolder those points and actually take this bad boy off. Don't forget about your anchors on the top and the bottom, but you take that off and you can actually mount it inside the case with the cartridge reader, which I didn't do on this one, but I did do it on that one. This one I kind of messed up on, and I kind of cut out a hole there because I didn't realize it the first time I was going through this mod. So I cut out a hole there and placed it in there, and it was working quite well. It still read when it was Game Boy Advance, and it read when it was Game Boy and Game Boy Color. I just didn't like how it sat. So on this new one, I went ahead and avoided that and actually fitted in internally. And I fit it right next to the cart slot. So I shaved down that plastic right in there. Right there. And I shaved down that and I fit it right next to the cart slot, so it looked like it was native with the motherboard. And it works perfectly. So don't forget about that, because you are going to need to desolder those 4 points, pull that bad boy off, and then once again maybe double the length of this wire right here to go ahead and fit it across to the other side when you're finished with this mod. And once again, it's just plug and play, so point 1 to point 1, yeah, so on and so forth. So that's how you do that. So let's go ahead. So if you plan on keeping the native power switch here, you are able to go ahead and connect it to the power switch of the SP. What you're going to want to do is cut around it, cut it out of the 1989 PCB, and you're going to notice on the back there's 2 pins right there. These 2 pins in front of my finger. Now think of them 1 and 2. So pin 1 is going to connect to pin 1 right here. Let me get a thing. So pin 1 is going to connect to pin 1 right there, and pin 2 is going to connect to the 4th pin, that one there, pin 2. So once again, it's going to be pin 1 and pin 2, and they're connect to pin 1 and pin 2. So pin 1, pin 2. Alrighty, and that's how you would go ahead, and you're just going to want to leave this in the off position. I would use some hot glue maybe to go ahead and taper it down. You leave this in the off position, and that's going to give you the ability to go ahead and use this as your native on-off switch, which I can show you right here. Now for the volume switch, you're going to want to go ahead and desolder it off. Once again, there's 6 points, 2 on the back, 2 on the top. And then you're going to want to use the same size length wire, maybe a little bit more if you want, but to make it all fit in there and not congest it inside, use that. And once again, it's plug and play, so you're going to want to put pin 1 back to pin 3 back to pin 3, 4 back to 4, 5, 6, and 1 and 2 on the other side. And it's at that point, that's very simple. And I'll show you all the mounting points I have inside the case when we're almost done here. So that would be the volume. So the tactile switches are very simple. Now you're not going to want to use these original native tactile switches that they have. They're very short. I opted for ones that were longer. I went ahead and I got them from Fry's Electronics. I'm sorry I can't show you the actual tactile switch, but there's the information right there. And I went ahead and for left and right, they stick out just fine from the holes that I made inside the bottom of the casing to go ahead and produce left and right button. And there's, once again, there's several places you can put these. You decide where you want to mount them. I personally, once again, I don't use left and right that much, so I mounted them in the pinky format, and they work just fine for me. Now to get them off, you're gonna flip the board over, and you're gonna have here, you're gonna have an anchor point there and an anchor point there. So these are just anchor points, and then you're gonna have your power and ground, or your ground and power, doesn't matter either way. So you have them on both sides. Once again, anchor, anchor, then you have your power, ground, power, ground. So you're going to want to go ahead and